Hi, this is Jan from Log Cabin Leather by Jan. I'm here in the basement of my log cabin home where I make all my handmade leather products. And this month, my focus is my new collection, which just launched, which is the Birds of a Feather collection. These are some of the items from that collection. And today I'm going to share with you a little bit about what inspired this collection and actually how I make the patterns for this. During this whole month, I'll be taking you behind the scenes and showing you actually how I create the products while I'm telling you stories and so forth about what inspired them and about the individual birds that make up the collection and why I selected those and so forth. So today, it's all about what really inspired them. Um, I started making leather feather jewelry a number of years ago, and I'm not sure if this really inspired that collection to start with, to be quite honest. This was an ornament I bought at a craft show a number of years ago, and I loved it. And for years I wanted to kind of make something like it. So I'm not sure if this is really what inspired my leather feather jewelry, because of course, again, this was one of the feather shapes kind of, and I do make beautiful feather earrings. A lot of people, again, I have some here, think they look like real feathers. I mean, the camera doesn't do them justice, but it does actually look like a real feather, and they're kind of molded and shaped like feathers might be, and so forth. So instead of being just flat like this images, they have a little more dimension to them. So that may have very well has inspired my jewelry collection. But I love this cutout idea, and I wanted to make some ornaments. So now the cocopelli, of course, is something, because again, I'm into the Native American culture. If you don't know anything about me, November will be all about that. So this is, again, so I kind of like this idea. So I wanted to set out and to make kind of an ornament, or again, not necessarily an ornament. I mean, this doesn't have to be an ornament. It can be a decoration to hang on your wall at any time of the year. So I had this one, or actually I had two of them. And in one of them, the center of it got broken out. So again, I started with the idea for the feather, and I had done a few feather things that were large like this, and I had carved a scene on it and so forth. This is actually a feather shape, but again, it's just this. And I didn't care for that so much. I did kind of like this cutout idea. So when this fell out, that was kind of like, maybe I could use that. I'm going to use this as a pattern to make some of these, use that idea. So that's what I did. I set out, and again, here I drew I'm not sure if the last time the lighting on these is not all that great. So the pattern here is the actual cocopelli where I traced it onto the leather. So then I went from there using that shape without the cutout in the middle. So more like this pattern here, where I had now traced the feather and now made that cutout space in the middle. So the first thing is to try and make these patterns. And I have a piece of equipment that is going to help cut these, which is why I could never do this before. I mean, I had this, I've had this for, 6-8 years now, these feathers, wood, which are made of wood, but I didn't have any way of cutting that detail or anything. Now I do, which is what I'm going to talk about next week in my second video in this series. So now I had to go about and draw the patterns, and it is a learning curve. And again, I wish this showed better on the camera, because it doesn't seem like the paper for some reason shows very well. So now you can see I have white out on over here. It's because you had to, I drew the mountain in second, realized, of course, in order for it to cut out and be attached, it has to attach to the side of the edges of the feather. So same thing like the cocopelli, it touches there, which is where it broke. This tree, again, I had done it a first time, but in here I had a little bit too much detail, and when it made it, it kind of cut out the bottom of the tree completely. I mean, it still had it attached, but it just had a very long, skinny trunk. So I changed that pattern a little bit. So that's where I started out. But then I realized not all birds have the same shaped feather. If I wanted to make these real feathers, now see, some birds I already had some idea on. For my feather jewelry collection, I already made loon feathers. I already made eagle feathers. I already made cardinal feathers. I already made bluebird feathers. But again, those were some of the things I knew about. But I went on to really research the shape of the feather. And, what I have for my jewelry is the colors the bird has in it, but not necessarily what the actual individual feathers look like. Like, for example, on a turkey wing feathers are different than the turkey tail feathers. The tail feathers are really the ones that are beautiful, as are in a lot of birds. And so I went out to research. And again, this shape of the feather and where the feather comes from obviously is different shapes and colors. But I did do some research on some different birds. And I started out with birds that I saw in my backyard. So that's where I started researching the shapes of the feathers. So then I started making the patterns in, more in different shapes. Like this is the shape of a blue jay's feather. And so, the eagle has the more pointy feather. The loon has a more rounded feather. So I set out to, the chickadee here has a very squared at the bottom feather. And so that's what I set out to look at for certain birds. Now, of course, there's millions of birds I could pick from. I decided to start one since it was kind of a holiday collection. Although it doesn't really have to be for Christmas. I mean, they make awesome Christmas ornaments, but not necessarily for Christmas. I started to think about birds that I saw in my backyard and birds that stay around through the winter. Because again, I'm into things that are realistic. I'm trying to sell these. I mean, again, what I came up with though, they aren't really very seasonal. I mean, this is what the actual colors on the bird's feather are. So that's what I set out to do, was research the feathers so I could make now this whole feather here. I do have to carve and put some details in it. This has no details in it at all. And of course, this is not correct because I don't have any piece in the middle that's attached here. Most of them, I did realize I had to make some scene in the background because I am going to put cutouts of the actual bird that this feather represents. So if this is an eagle feather, it's going to have an eagle in here. I needed a way to attach that eagle in the middle. It just can't be there in midair. So that was the next thing I had to think about. After that, I had to think about making patterns for the birds themselves. So I don't know if this is even going to show on the camera. Those are some chickadees. And again, it really started out with a picture from a book. And then I'm just using that outline of the bird. And then I'm trying to draw the details in there to replicate those. And so now these patterns, and again, I don't know if this even shows on the camera. I have a bigger one here, but I don't know if it will show any better. This is my owl pattern. Let's see again. I don't think any of this even shows on the camera. I'm not sure why. If you can see that. I have the bird here. This is a bluebird. So the outline of the bird now is in blue. And I'm looking up patterns and outlines of the birds online and things like that, getting the actual shape of the bird. I can, so I can make the patterns for that. I'm, drawing in some of the details of it and so forth. And those have to be in a different color. And for Glowy, who you're going to meet next week, to be able to cut them out. And that's the hardest part, because if these lines are too dark, Glowy's going to want to cut them. If they're too light, they're not going to show up. So that's with the hardest part of making these patterns. Now, so here is the actual pattern idea. Pattern for an owl I'm making. No, it's not going to show. I don't know if you can see that. There are some details in here. They're not quite as dark as I would like them to be. So again, that's where I have to experiment with making my pencil lines a little bit darker. The outline is in a red, I have it in red, so it contrasts, so the machine kind of comprehends what I'm trying to do, because I'm like scanning this image in and then kind of giving it directions to cut or engrave. So it is a little bit of a learning curve. There is other software I could probably make those applications a little bit easier, but I don't know how to do that. So the way so that's the most difficult part for me, and actually probably the most time consuming. Once I get it done, then again, I can resize it. Obviously this is not the size I'm using for this, but it is the actual pattern. Again, I don't know if the pattern even shows. Obviously much bigger than the little one in here is in the tree. It's about 2 inches tall. This is about 8 inches tall. I can resize it and make it the size I want. And so that's the next thing I had to do. I had to look at the feather and then look at the bird that I was going to put in that tree and make the pattern the right size so it's going to fit. Now, again, I'm not going to keep showing you the patterns because they don't seem to be showing up on the screen. But when making these patterns, these were some of the things that I ran into, like some of the branches, if I had the branches too high up on the tree, then the bird's going to sit too high up, and you're not really going to see it. Like I had another birch tree, and the branches again were up high. Well, if the bird sits up there, you don't really see it. It doesn't have any contrast. Things like that. I was working on that owl I just had. That's going to be for. It's also going to have like a stump, but again, the branches are going to be different. I'm trying to make them each different, and of course, again, to match the shape of the owl feather. So again, this is a barred owl. Bluebird, blue jay rather, goldfinch, cardinal, chickadee, bluebird. So those are the ones I have here for my backyard collection, is what I'm calling these. And then, again, I'll go into the details about how I paint these and so forth. Will be the third 2 weeks from now. Next week again is Chloe, how I cut them and create, now that I've created the patterns, what I do with them so I can cut them out. And then the third week, again, how I color and paint them and so forth will be the next week. So the other two in this collection are a loon and eagle one. And these are a little bit different. And again, they're all different. The birds are in slightly different positions in each one and so forth. They're all going to be one of a kind because that's what I strive for. So people have unique things, and, they'll come up with me 2 years later and show me something they have, like a checkbook cover, which I don't make too much anymore. And they'll say, see, oh, that's the exact thing I have. Not that so much anymore, but it isn't the exact same because they're all a little bit different. But now the loon and the eagle one here have the blue in the background. So it's just blue leather. Everything is leather. I don't use any other materials other than leather. The cord is even leather. Unless it's a book or an insert or hardware, it's made of leather. So this is an eagle feather, and this is an eagle. He has a fish in its mouth. That probably is hard to see in this picture. And this loon has a chick on the back. I also have another one I'm doing that has the loon and 2 chicks on the back. Again, mountains in the background here. That's what I'm going to be showing next week and so forth. The scene here is going to be different on each one. This is carved into the leather, which is a different process. Then again, see these trees. This was that first one, the pattern. It came out with a little bit more cut than I wanted to, and so forth. And so they're all like 3D. And so I think that's what makes them cool. So that's pretty much going to wrap it up today. How I make the patterns for these things. Again, first I have to make the feathers. Then I have to create the birds. Then I have to get the patterns to come out dark enough or get Chloe to understand what I want her to do with the pattern so it will cut it out the way I wanted to. Trial and error on a lot of it. But once I get the patterns established and so forth, I can actually make them different sizes and things if I want to, too. Once I have a good pattern, obviously, if I make it really tiny, the detail isn't going to come out and so forth. But I can resize them and make them different, larger or smaller if I want to. Same thing with the birds. Obviously, too much smaller, you're not going to see the detail. It's going to be too tiny. That's going to wrap it up for now. Next week, again, join me when I introduce you to Chloe and show you how all these little patterns are cut out, because there's no way in the world that I could cut something out, even, that shape in leather with the little details down here of his claws and so forth. Leather is pretty thick and pretty hard to cut. So without the help of Chloe, I would not be able to do it. Thank you very much. Once again, this is Jan Hibbard, Log Cabin Leather by Jan. Please follow me here on YouTube. Subscribe to my channel. You can also find me on Facebook. My Facebook is Log Cabin Leather by Jan. My website is logcabinleatherbyjan.com. If you go to my website, or there's actually a link in the comments to this to join my email, you're going to get an automatic 20% discount off of anything you purchase, your first time purchase, which can include this collection. I do have to say it launched a few days ago, and it is starting, some things are limited already out of the amount I made of items. So some of them may sell out. So you want to check it out sooner than later. That's going to wrap it up for now. Once again, Jan Hibbard, Log Cabin Leather by Jan. Thank you very much.